to say that, look, these are complex, they're comprehensive, they're constructive negotiations with the Americans. They're ongoing.
This is what you call stalling. Well, we're working on it, and I want to thank the teams that are there, and
disrupt America that I fought for.
Weird thing to happen. Remember elbows up? Remember that craze? Remember we were gonna fight back? We're gonna go after Trump and his nasty tariffs. Well, not doing too well. Not doing too well. As reported by the CBC, Canada disappointed by Trump boosting tariffs to 35%, says Carney. Are you sure it's not Canadians disappointed that a billionaire central banker didn't have the oomph or the fight to go after something like Trump? Almost like it's done purposely. Almost like they want to impose these tariffs to systematically destroy the very fabric and foundation of Canada, to sell us off like a liquidated sale. I mean, I'm just spitballing here, but it sounds like that's the plan. At least that's according to Mark Carney's written testimony when he published the book Values, that, hey, we got to systematically change the country of Canada. The Prime Minister says historic investments have been made into border security as Trump raises fentanyl again. Why does he keep bringing this up? Why does he keep harping on a problem that we know here in Canada is extremely a problem? Obviously, Russian collusion, it's disinformation. Obviously, the statements on X, we got to control them. Prime Minister Mark Carney released a statement just past midnight on Friday after U.S. President Donald Trump signed an executive order to increase a tariff on Canadian goods to 35%. While the Canadian government is disappointed by this action, we remain committed to the Canadian-U.S.-Mexico Agreement, which is the world's second largest free trade agreement by trading volume, the statement read. Well, apparently it's not good enough, which is why I've been stating that this whole trade war could be resolved if all these nations gather together and coordinate a proper deal. Here, Poilievre stated when he was fighting against Justin Trudeau, when these tariffs were first getting announced, he stated on Global News Radio that if he became prime minister, he was willing to negotiate with Donald Trump. He was able to have a back and forth business sit down with Trump, with Mexico, and resort to an actual proper agreement. But we haven't done any of that. And in fact, it's almost like Mark Carney is continuing this tariff war and wants to keep this going as much as possible. We first thought it was just because he wanted the brownie points to become elected as prime minister. But now that he is prime minister, he wants to keep this going for another reason. And you could probably guess why. The U.S. application of CUSMA means that the U.S. average tariff rate on Canada goods remains one of its lowest for all of its trading partners. Other sectors of our economy include lumber, steel, aluminum, and automobiles are, however, heavily impacted by U.S. duties and tariffs. He says the Canadian government will act to protect Canadian jobs, invest in industrial competitiveness, buy Canadian, and diversify export markets. Well, isn't that great that you brought in more migrant workers and give them amnesty to replace Canadian labor? And then in the meantime, that's going to further expand the AI technological advance, so it's going to replace those migrant workers. Thank God. Thank God we're advancing that way. But not enough to actually have a proper sit-down situation to resolve this trade war, which is affecting everybody. It's affecting everybody. They make it sound like, oh, it's only the other countries that have to pay. No, you as a consumer have to pay. You as a consumer always have to pay. Just like how the carbon taxes, you were told that, oh, it's only big companies they're paying it. You don't get to pay it at all, but these big companies, they got to be penalized. No, you get penalized. You get penalized because the domino effect keeps going, and the cost burn goes on to you. And what are you going to do? What are you going to say? Who's defending you? Even though the vast bulk of Canada's exports can still cross the border tariff-free, Trump's executive order increases the tariff rate, which has been set at 25% since March, to 35% starting Friday. The order cites Canada's lack of cooperation in stemming the flood of fentanyl and other illicit drugs across our northern border, and the fact that Canada has retaliated against the United States for the president's actions. Carney's statement also outlined all the work Canada has been doing to crack down on fentanyl and increase border security. Canada accounts for only 1% of U.S. fentanyl imports and has been working intensively to further reduce those volumes, he said. So that's the government gaslighting you on that. The government's still continuously gaslighting people and saying that's only 1%. Only 1%. The biggest drug bust they did in this nation's history. It was 95 million pounds of fentanyl. That's not 1%. That's not 1%. And when you have populations, when you have your own people that are dying of overdose as young as 12 years old, that is a crisis. And that's a crisis for a significant amount of time. So this is them lying to you. This is them covering their tails, covering their asses, and saying it's not a big deal, while organized crime continues to flourish, while fentanyl manufacturing still continues on, while they haven't systematically shut this down. Because, unfortunately, criminal cartels, criminal syndicates, drug trafficking, human trafficking is multi-billion-dollar industries. And they pay towards the government, and the government stays quiet. Canada's government is making historic investments in border security to arrest drug traffickers, take down transnational gangs, and end migrant smuggling. Carney says that they have hired thousands of new law enforcement and border security officers, implemented aerial surveillance, and increased Canada's intelligence and security operations. Speaking to reporters at the White House, Trump was asked whether Carney's announcement that Canada plans to recognize a Palestinian state was a deal breaker on trade. I didn't like what they said, but that's their opinion, Trump said. Not a deal breaker, but we haven't spoken to Canada today. He's called and we'll see. Trump told NBC News Thursday evening that he was opening to further discussions with Canada, adding that he may even speak with Carney later in the night. Carney's office would not confirm that a call was placed to the White House and told CBC News it is not confirming any details about the ongoing negotiations. In a separate executive order on Thursday, Trump hit dozens of countries around the world with new across-the-board tariffs rates ranging from 15 to 41%. After speaking with Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum, Trump gave Mexico a 90-day extension of its current tariff regime, despite having previously threatened to raise the rate effective Friday. Canada's trade negotiating team is in Washington, but officials were tight-lipped Thursday about who they were meeting with, if anyone. So, Mexico gets a 90-day extension. They just did a deal with the European Union, even though the European Union, I think, got the round end of the stick, mostly because they've been completely bombarded by the United States, and they just have to come to a negotiation. So I think that's mostly why. I mean, the United States blew up their natural gas resource pipeline, the pipeline that went from Russia to European nations. So that compromised a lot of it. on top of cutting back the funding on Ukraine, even though the United States is now continuing funding on Ukraine. But so all these countries are doing deals, and Canada just seems to be hesitant still. And like I said, the burden eventually comes onto you. And we already know how much a burden life here is in Canada with carbon taxes, with GST hikes, with HST hikes, tax to no end. And now on top of this, we're dealing with tariffs that are eventually going to go onto you. And people don't realize just how much these tariffs will affect their everyday lifestyle. Like, people don't realize that, yes, you can try to buy more Canadian goods. That, you know, I always encourage that, regardless if there's a trade war or not. But, you know, here in Canada, we don't have the climate to make coffee beans. So coffee eventually has to come from another country. And if that country puts a tariff on the trade of sending beans or fruits or whatever across the world, it affects the pricing for you. It affects the consumer pricing, meaning that it's going to be more expensive for average things like coffee or fruits or vegetables that can't be made in Canada because we don't have the clientele to have produce it. So ultimately, this is just, it's so crazy. It's so crazy. And like I said, it could easily be resolved. It could easily be resolved if we sat down, if we had a strong, comprehensive argument, and we negotiate through to come out with a deal. Do not let a Canadian politician let out the door without scrutinizing a deal. And unfortunately, it just seems like our Canadian leaders just don't seem to care about that. And Trump says that he's not concerned about Canada recognizing a Palestinian state, which ultimately I think it's kind of too late to even have this mention, considering what's happening in Gaza. It's like completely destroyed. So recognizing a Palestinian state is just, honestly, I think it's just pointless at this point. But Donald Trump is making an angersome tweet about this, or an angersome Truth Social post about this. It says, wow, Canada has just announced that it's backing the statehood for Palestine. That will make it very hard for us to do a trade deal with them. Oh, Canada. I don't know why that has anything to do with a trade deal, but that's Donald Trump's messaging on that. And it kind of has put a dent into trade negotiations. Here's Mark Carney, as reported by Rebel News, says, we'll see. Prime Minister Carney says it's possible that no trade deal will be reached between Canada and the United States ahead of the August 1st deadline. So he's making these false promises that we're working on it, we're talking, we're going to eventually do something. Here's another false promise.
Question is, well, I'll simplify. It's always good to say that, look, these are complex, they're comprehensive, they're constructive negotiations with the Americans are ongoing. It's possible that they may not conclude by the 1st of August. But we'll see. The team's there. We're working hard. Conversations today, myself. So we'll see. There are, and the specific aspect of the question included a reference to the European Union deal, and could.
So that's what you call stalling. This is what you call stalling. Well, we're working on it, and I want to thank the teams that are there, and yeah, we're in talks right now, and your question, your thing that you said, I'm not going to answer that, but I'm just going to go on about random stuff. So he's on stage stalling because he knows that the trade talks are pretty just non-existent. It's very, very, very minimal. And as I looked at it, and I'm not an economist, I'm not an expert in trading between countries or negotiations like that, but my understanding is that, hey, if you get two nations to sit together or three nations to sit together, if you're able to hammer out this CUSMA agreement, the Canadian, U.S., Mexico agreement, then you just got to do the same thing. Bring the countries together, hammer out a deal. Do not leave the room until something is actually set in stone, that we actually have a promising deal, and we can resolve this. But Carney is just so hesitant on this, that he's just going to stand there and stall to the cameras and to the press about not doing anything. Not doing anything. Like, how hard it would be for him to just go to the United States, call directly to Trump, say, I'm going to meet with you, we're going to meet at the White House, or you come up to Ottawa, and let's hammer this out. Let's get this done. Let's lock the doors, not leave the room until we get a damn trade deal confirmed. How hard would that be? How hard would that be? Well, according to them, it's pretty difficult.
Could our accord with the United States include commitments on investments and other aspects? And I just observed that there are many areas for cooperation between Canada and the United States, including defense spending, security spending, investments, which is one of the reasons why we're having these problems.
So yeah, that's what you call stalling. That's what you call stalling on camera, because you know that there's no talks, because you know that there's no follow through, and you don't have an actual response to give hope to Canadians about this. And this is just going to put more of a burden onto us, because people thought that Mark Carney was going to be this strong man to go after a guy like Trump. Well, boy, were they duped. Boy, are those elbows up people just covered in egg on their face, knowing that this is happening. So here is one of the representatives in the pro-Canadian trade agreement and trying to part of the elbows up committee, Dominic LeBlanc, who's the Minister of Trade and trying to negotiate with America. He goes on to Face the Nation, and he's also going to gaslight Canadians, because we know that it's pretty stale, that these conversations aren't leading to anything, that these phone calls are just becoming less and less promising. But he's going to, again, gaslight people at home, thinking that, oh, I'm here wasting your tax dollars doing the right thing. I'm fighting for you, by doing nothing.
As I say, the conversations have been informative, constructive, and cordial. I would expect the Prime Minister will have a conversation with the President over the next number of days. That's certainly my plan, again, with Secretary Lutnick, recognizing that we think there is an option of striking a deal that will bring down some of these tariffs, provide greater certainty to investment. Ms. Brennan, we passed in Canada our version of the President's One Big Beautiful Bill. It's called the One Canadian Economy Act, which we think will unlock up to $500 billion of investment in Canada for things like pipelines, port infrastructure, mines, all of which offer huge opportunities to America.
So he's trying to butter up people by saying, look, here in Canada, we have our own One Great Beautiful Bill. It's called the One Canadian Economy Act, and we're building pipelines. We're doing this. We're creating infrastructure, creating more jobs. That's not the case. Just like how the Big Beautiful Bill was a slap in the face to America. So just keep in mind, anytime I cover this story, it's not to defend America. I'm not defending Trump in this. I'm saying that they're both idiots. I'm saying both sides are idiotical to keep this trade war going, how it's afflicting onto us, and that the solution should be to get these people into line, challenge them. We got to boot their asses into negotiation tables and hammer out a deal. That's what we got to do. But the more they keep harping on this, the more they keep longevating this and keep it as long as possible, these back and forth tariffs that are just causing mayhem, it's not helping either side of the aisle. It's just so idiotic. And not just the fact that Dominic LeBlanc used to be the former safety commissioner, the safety minister here in this country, whose greatest idea was, hey, let's give all the hunting guns over to Ukraine. Remember that? Remember how great that policy was, how great that turned out? Yeah, all you hunters and sportsmen and people at hobby shops, yeah, we're going to take away your hunting guns and send them off to Ukraine to go kill people. Because, you know, playing sports and doing the right thing is not good here in Canada. But it's okay, we give it to a country to go slaughter people. Like, these are idiotic people. These are idiotic people. And like I said, I'm not an economist. I'm not an expert in trade. Don't harp me and say, well, what solution do you have? I'm saying that both sides need to just put down their differences. They need to brush aside whatever pettiness back and forth and just hammer out a deal. If they were able to do it with the USMCA agreement, then surely they can do this exact same thing over again with this and commit to actually stopping the trafficking of fentanyl, human trafficking, and actually resort to common senses. But neither side seems to be partaking in this. Neither side wants to do anything about this, which makes me believe that they want this trade war to keep going. They want these tariffs because they realize that they don't have to pay squat. It's you. You are forced to be footing the bill for this burden. Just so idiotically crazy. And here's this guy, Paul Mitchell, who I guess is from Alberta, according to his handle here. So he states, this is all the impacts that's happening. So new tariff rates within the United States. So the European Union is at 15%. So that's after they just did a negotiation. I don't think it worked well for the European Union, but at least it's something. At least it's set in stone. The UK at 10%. Japan's at 15%. Canada's at 35%. And it's going to continue to climb if we don't hammer out something soon. He says, congratulations to Liberal Ottawa for getting the worst deal imaginable and torpedoing what used to be one of the most and very best trade relations in the world. Elbows up. Exactly. This is destabilizing a partnership that's been around for eons. And for Mark Carney to just brush this aside, for Donald Trump to, have these hissy fits about, pettiness of Palestinian statehood, it just shows the disregard and the seriousness of this situation. Like, if they actually cared about their respected people in respected countries, they would already be doing talks right now. But of course, they're trying to stall people. They're trying to gaslight people. They're going to the media to parrot the same phrases of, oh, well, the economy is still doing well, even though Donald Trump and his trade war. Well, the economy is doing well, blah, 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 blah. And the same's going in the United States. But truth be told, when you go to your department store, when you go to, say, Walmart or Target or even shopping online or wherever the case may be, you'll see that burden. When you see how much of a jump average products get because you eventually are footing the bill for the legislation that didn't even need to exist and doesn't need to happen and could easily be resolved in a simple matter, but just the idiotic measures of these psychotic people just puts the rest of us, and I'm saying on behalf of Canada and America, all of us at risk.